Hello, good afternoon to all. Uh, First of all, a very warm welcome to Global Tribune. Today, we are here to discuss on changing dimensions of ACTist during pandemic. Now, I would like to request Dr. Nandini Vasisht. She is postdoctoral fellow and assistant professor of Amity Institute of Liberal Arts, Amity University, Mumbai, to continue the program. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Dibakar. Hello, everyone, to our national webinar organized by Global Tribune. First of all, I want to thank all the viewers for joining us in this beautiful Sunday evening. During our 1 hour session, if you have anything to say, comment, or ask, you can write in the comment section below. Today's topic of discussion, as already Dibakar said, changing dimensions of activists during pandemic. Before I invite all the speakers to say about this topic, I want to just inform some basic ideas about actist, lookist, as well as the pandemic situation, what is going on. As you all know, that just after the end of the Cold War, when the world became multipolar, India started to look its Korea, Singapore, as well as many multilateral organizations like ASEAN, like East Asia Summit. Also, India is actively engaged in various regional fora such as BIMSTEC, um, Asia Cooperation Dialogue, Mekong Congo Cooperation, and Indian Ocean Rim Association. This proactive activist policy, bilateral and regional levels, through trade, culture, people-to-people contacts, and physical telecommunication, power, etc. We can see multi-layered policy for this diversified region, which includes various multimodal and multilateral projects. Through various meetings and quick procedures, the India government is trying to hasten the work of activist policy. But as you know, all these policies now at stake due to pandemic. Now conventional ways of economic, cultural and security relations are not valid. So we need to rethink and formulate new ways of establishing fruitful relation with our eastern neighborhood. I hope our distinguished speakers can enlighten us on this issue. Our first speaker is Professor Lipi Ghosh. She is currently Director of Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies, Calcutta University. She was ex-Dean of Arts, Calcutta University, ex-Fulbright Fellow. She wrote 18 books and several articles. The topic of today's discussion, what she will specially focus, that is India's activist policy during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, without wasting time, I want to invite Professor Lipi Ghosh to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Bushishto. First of all, I must convey my sincere thanks to Global Tribune for extending me this opportunity to speak on changing dimensions of activists during pandemic. And what I am going to talk today, that is understanding India's activist policy during this pandemic of 2020. And I have, first of all, I'm going to place before you the structure of my deliberation. First of all, I will talk very briefly about the difference between Lookist and activist policy. Then I will say a few words about pre-COVID situation. And then I will switch over to activist during COVID-19. And you must keep in mind that saying activist, I will just like to concentrate or rather limit my discussion about India's relations with Southeast Asia. And then further, for the final point, what I'm going to say, that is why we should need to refocus our active policy in during pandemic and post-pandemic period. So this being the structure, let me start. First of all, defining actist. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the upgrading of the India's erstwhile lookist policy to a more action-oriented actist strategy at the India ASEAN Summit in Myanmar in November 2014. An analytical understanding of ACTIST since its announcement has been largely seen from a number of official statements which emphasized India's eagerness to play a proactive role in its East. And most of the statements are attributable to Prime Minister Modi, who has contextually alluded to ACTIST on several occasions. The first choice there was at the ASEAN Summit in November 2014 in Myanmar, when he announced the upgrading of the Lookist policy to the action oriented ACTIST policy. He mentioned ACTIST again during the visit to South Korea in May 2014, emphasizing the country's importance as a partner in the policy. After that, former External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj underlined India's efforts to engage more deeply with Southeast Asia through the Actist policy and described Thailand as a significant partner in this respect when she visited Bangkok in June 2015. The Indian former President Pranab Mukherjee also mentioned the policy during his address to the heads of states of Pacific Island in Delhi in August 2015. Prime Minister Modi provided the most emphatic conceptual illustration of the strategy during his visit to Singapore in November 2015. A few aspects of the policy since its first mention by Prime Minister have become increasingly evident and can be pieced together as a part of a broader regional construct to be adopted within the larger rubric of future India's foreign policy. The most distinct among these aspects are the far greater geographical scope of the policy and its strategic depth compared with Lukist policy. So, in brief, what I'd like to say that main difference between Lukist policy and Actist policy is that the former aim to increase economic ties with only the Southeast Asian countries, whereas the latter aim to increase economic as well as defense related ties with Southeast and East Asian countries. So let us switch over to the next point, that is how was the pre-COVID situation in India and Southeast Asia relations. India joined ASEAN in 1992 as a sectoral partner and became a full-fledged member in 1994. It is now an active member of the ASEAN Regional Forum, that is ARF, the East Asian Summit, that is EAS, and ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus. There are many sectoral dialogue mechanisms, as many ministerial level interactions in addition to annual summit level meetings. The same characteristic feature is also seen in the cases of both Japan and South Korea, two major pillars in India's Actist policy. A vast array of institutional mechanisms bind their partnership in such forums like annual summit, strategic dialogue, defense dialogue, and numerous forums of energy cooperation, counter-terrorism, etc., cyber security, maritime cooperation, etc. So that being the pre-COVID situation, how the Actist is running during the COVID-19 period. India continues its battle against COVID-19 as 1.3 billion people remain homebound under the world's largest national lockdown. India may not be one of the worst hit countries so far, but due to the innate socio-economic disparities, inadequate public health system, and differences in the state's competency, it faces many challenges in its commitment plan. So, East Asian countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Vietnam, on one hand, have shown remarkable success in responding to the COVID-19 outbreak. So, as such, India now refocusing on its Act East policy to ensure an effective response to the pandemic, but also to leverage the opportunity to gain more influence in the region. Now I'm specifically dealing with Southeast and East Asian response to COVID and the learning for or lessons for India. The East Asian countries have been extremely successful in flattening the curve in the early stages of the outbreak. The use of digital technology, previous experiences with epidemics, tough and timely decision making by the leadership are some of the factors which contributed to their success. Digital technology has been the most remarkable tool of all. South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong utilize digital technology not only for effective contact tracing but also for delivering test results, enforcing home quarantine, and delivery of medical and household supplies. Singapore came up with a Bluetooth enabled contact tracing app called Trace Together, like our Arogya Setu, while Hong Kong included an app that uses geofencing technology to enforce the compulsory quarantine. Such aggressive response stemmed from the fact that most of these countries have been victims of previous epidemics like SARS and MERS. Vietnam was one of the worst affected countries during the SARS epidemic of 2003, and it was also the first in the region to control its spread within its borders. Vietnam's prior experience with SARS came handy while responding to COVID 19, so much so there is only a handful of cases in the country right now. Taiwan, also a survivor of SARS, set a global benchmark for early contact tracing by leveraging on its big data and A1 capabilities. The East Asian countries, therefore, can provide an alternate model to the world in mitigating the outbreak, and India can leverage its historically good relations to learn and implement the best practices from these countries. Now, what I would like to say that India needs to refocus Actist policy in the post-pandemic period. The Actist policy is one of India's flagship diplomatic initiatives aimed at promoting strategic, economic, cultural relations with greater Asia Pacific region. India has time and again reiterated on the importance of enriching relations with its eastward neighbors, pertaining to various traditional and non-traditional securities. Looking at the success of East Asian economies in dealing with the pandemic and shifting trends in the global order, it is appropriate to say that India has both short-term and long-term imperatives to deepen its engagement with the region. The pandemic is already on the verge of creating new paradigms where countries are thinking about hardening borders, not only to prevent a rapid rise in the cases, but also to keep their economies safe. This would mean more deliberation by countries when it comes to looking for strategic partners. And therefore, countries would look at closer proximity in making alliances. This is where exactly India can reinforce or refocus on its Actist policy. Most of the countries in East Asia that have shown remarkable success in dealing with the crisis are also the countries which are economically and technologically advanced, and therefore they have higher bandwidth to provide their expertise. Initiating collaborative responses, coming up with economic recovery plans, facilitating joint medical research, and sharing digital technology know how are some of the key areas where India should focus at the moment while engaging with the region. India's policy of self reliant India, that is Atmanirbhar Bharat, can be a good interactive platform for this. ASEAN is already cooperating with China, Japan, and South Korea through ASEAN Plus 3 mechanism as well as Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, that is RCEP. And this reflects ASEAN resolve uh, for broader multilateral engagement in the wake of the pandemic. The fact is that members of the RCEP sent a fresh proposal to India to return to the negotiation table, which shows a clear intent to have India as a strategic partner in the backdrop of COVID 19. However, owing to post pandemic concerns over China, India is still opposed to joining the trade bloc. This is, in a way, to my own opinion, obviously, it is my personal opinion, that it is a kind of counterintuitiveness or counteraction when we study Prime Minister Modi's latest address, where he has highlighted that India needs to convert crisis into opportunity. So now perhaps this is the high time that we need to rethink about our policy on RCEP. Considering the shifts and dynamics in which the world is likely to operate, I have submission of 3 points where India needs to change its lens. Number one is that angle of RCEP. In view of our decision to remain outside the present regional comprehensive economic partnership, that is RCEP draft, India would have to focus on the existing comprehensive economic cooperation agreements with countries of the region. The latter also have networks of supply chains. That means what I like to say, that even if India doesn't directly join RCEP, she can definitely develop good economic relations with other Southeast Asian countries who are joined with RCEP in a direct way. That way, India perhaps can indirectly contribute towards RCEP. Secondly, manufacturing sector is a plus point. Definitely, it is a strength of India because Indian manufacturing has proven its ability to becoming the top supplier of PPE kits, N95 masks, and pharmaceuticals in a matter of just 2 months. India's support in the form of medical equipment and medicines to Southeast Asian countries during the pandemic has shown its commitment to work together with the neighbors during the hour of their need. Collaboration in pharmaceutical and vaccine research can be an area of considerable significance in our Act East policy. There is no doubt at all. So, the post COVID situation offers an opportunity for India in the Indo Pacific. The COVID experience of the countries of Asian region with China is not very stable to carry on business as usual in the pre COVID era. India would no doubt have the obviously, India can no doubt redouble its efforts with the countries of East and Southeast Asia to promote trade and investment as well as engagement in multiple fields. COVID 19 brings an amazing opportunity for India to become the world's significant place for manufacturing. New opportunities about Japan, Korea, Australia, are also very promising. Business investment of Japan, Australia, and Korea are on the verge of move from China to different places. Japan has declared to shift its different investment from China, and Australia also announced a massive 270 billion Australian dollar for defense outlay over the next decade. And so that way, perhaps India can now open its own space to these places. Even Korea, South Korea, is very much willing to invest in Chennai. So these are the future scopes in the post-pandemic period. And the third point of my submission is that about Northeast India. The Act East policy needs to be further re-emphasized because of its special relation with northeastern states of India. A resource endowed northeastern region is the most important driver of Act East policy as it directly connects Indian markets with that of Southeast Asia. Over the past 2 weeks, COVID 19 cases in northeastern states have seen a sudden spike. The region is relatively vulnerable because it not only lacks sufficient medical infrastructure but also has a huge migrant population who are now returning home due to the pandemic. The hilly terrains and poor connectivity make controlling the outbreak even more challenging. Therefore, containing the COVID 19 spread and post pandemic recovery and development of the region should be in the government's utmost priority while refocusing on the actist policy. Overall, in terms of traditional and non traditional security in the post COVID era, India and the countries of East are well poised to draw closer towards a security convergence. And before I conclude, I would just like to say one thing that after this pandemic period, it was expected that China may follow a low profile for the few years to come. But in actual situation, we see that whether Galwan or other places like Myanmar Rohingya crisis, or in the South China Sea, China is just acting in a different way. They are now more aggressive. So that way, perhaps India has a big scope to get aligned with Southeast Asian nations. So I conclude with the words that world is growing through uncertain times and it grapples to contain the outbreak of a deadly virus. Among many other things, it is going to have a significant impact on the current world order. This pandemic brings a great opportunity for India to reimagine its role in the international arena, and ACT is just one of the many things that India needs to re-emphasize. India always believed in the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that world is our friend. And that way, perhaps once more, India can be the main strength in this Asian region to show the peace of path of peace and tranquility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lipidi, for this informative presentation. Every time I listen to you, really gain a lot of knowledge about all these current happenings in India, Southeast Asia, or India, East Asian neighborhood relation. Um, I am especially interested to know more about Northeast India and its role in Act's policy. I will come back to you later on after uh, hearing, after listening to the other speakers. Uh, our second speaker is Rohini Naik. She is presently working as a junior fellow at Observer Research Foundation. She is pursuing her PhD from Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. She has completed MPhil from the same department. Sohini's primary area of interest lies in India's foreign policy, regionalism and sub-regionalism in South Asia, and the Indo-Nepal dynamics. Her topic of today's discussion is changing dimensions of activists during the pandemic. Now I invite Sohini to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Vasishta. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank at the very outset Global Tribune for this invitation and this opportunity. I'm Sohini, and today I would be primarily focusing and putting forward my views on the changing trends of regional order in the post-COVID world. Now, as we know, the world is grappling with the COVID-19 virus, and this particular situation, this pandemic, has also revealed the flip side of globalization. Now, concerted global response has been largely absent in addressing the unprecedented crisis unleashed by this COVID-19. Now, what we are primarily looking at is the establishment of a concerted regional response so that the crisis can be contained in a much better way, right? Now, the United Nations Security Council, which is an institution at the heart of global multilateral efforts, has been condemned for failing to bring forth a comprehensive resolution for COVID-19. The World Health Organization also, has very limited regulatory authority, and that also has been, brought under sharp criticism from the Western world as well as Asia at large. Now, with the global effort largely being absent, there basically comes forward the dire need for governments to coordinate response mechanisms. And here, right at this point, space has opened up for regional organizations to lead and complement national response. Okay, now how far regional organizations can fill up this vacuum is what is, the main question, is what is supposed to be known at this point. How important regional organizations can be and whether they can actually fill up the vacuum between the multilateral effort and the national response. Which also comes with its own set of challenges like maintaining national health, the supply chain, global response, everything. And so I feel that time is right to re-envisage our own perceptions of regional order, given the shifting contours of economy, public health, security, and society at large. Now, I would be primarily focusing on South and Southeast Asia because the topic of today's discussion primarily aims at the Act East policy. Now, when we talk about South and Southeast Asia, we must remember that the ever transitional regional dynamics of these two specific regions are basically a response to multitudinous geopolitical demands that want balance and integration at the same time. Now, in the recent past, right after the COVID pandemic started hitting this region, these two particular regions, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's strategic move to convene a video conference of the SAARC, that is the South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, to collectively bring contain this virus was a very contemplative effort, and it has, we all know that SAARC since a very long time has been dormant, and this was kind of a good effort in triggering the role of SAARC. However, as we are looking at a regional organization which is specifically dormant, and there is no consensus generation due to bilateral political dissonance, in this circumstance, how far we will be able to maximize the best potential of this particular regional organization is a question in itself. And SAARC is one of the core organizations of South Asia, and after this particular framework, this particular effort by the countries of South Asia, that is the SAARC countries, through the SAARC fund or the video conference or a kind of a regional effort, all these are there, but some kind of a lack of clarity about the future is also portrayed, because India is at the fulcrum. It is the fulcrum of this organization, the effort, but somehow a kind of a movement forward is lacking in this particular effort. Now, if we move on to the Southeast Association, the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that is doing far better in response, specifically regional response as far as the COVID-19 is concerned. However, we will come to the challenges later as well. And to be precise, SAARC and ASEAN both are being looked upon by the people, not only to take action, but also develop and adopt technical frameworks to help people survive. Specifically for outbreak investigation, capacity building interventions and public health emergency, scientific research, preparedness, response, strengthening the early warning systems, and learning from the past, essential medicines, working towards vaccines, medical devices, both within the member countries as well as the region at large. So basically the level of institutionalization. Okay. However, SAARC and ASEAN at this level, they cannot be compared. However, they have their own set of challenges that they have come up with, because these regional commitments at the high level meetings, sometimes they have not matched up to the ground. As member states continue prioritizing effective national solutions, national response within the country rather than regional response across the border as a whole, right? So this is all the more important because definitely we have to agree that the varying levels of infection, in particular countries is not the same, nor is the political will of each country. Okay, so the response by one country might not be similar to the response by another country. So if there is a lack in a concerted effort, regional effort to come together and put forward mechanisms for the region as a whole, I don't think that national efforts per se can alone help in containing the pandemic, since this pandemic knows no border. Now, for example, Singapore and Vietnam have been cited as global success, in ASEAN. But when we come to Indonesia, we have seen that, there was an initial response of denial and then downplaying the nature of the crisis. So the very nature of pandemic has highlighted fundamental tensions. Also in South Asia, we have seen that there are several people who are stuck. The migrant laborers are stuck, specifically in the Indo-Nepal border. We have seen that many people are stuck. They have, with the shutdown of the border and the lockdown, and they have not been able to leave. They are stranded there, and they are also complaining that they have not been able to receive complete protection and care from the host country or the country where they are present at the time being, right across the border. So in this situation, it is important that India realizes, specifically because India is a major global power here, which is trying to lead the SAARC. It is trying to learn from the ASEAN, because ASEAN definitely it has extremely important examples that India can learn from. So at this point in time, India must look into other organizations that can help India not only take opportunity from the situation to strengthen its regional dynamics, regional prowess, but also it can activate organizations that hold within themselves the potential of moving forward. For example, the BIMSTEC. The Bay of Bengal Association, that is, that has been silent in this pandemic. And I am mentioning BIMSTEC all the more because, the Department of Public Health, led by Thailand, within BIMSTEC, has this reassuring availability of medical facilities. And in the recent past also, BIMSTEC has been often portrayed as a bridge between South and Southeast Asia through the Act East policy. So at this point in time, I think India must definitely focus on the BIMSTEC, in the re-emergence of the BIMSTEC, and it must, take note of the fact that the BIMSTEC can work as a point of harmony between South and Southeast Asia, because I don't know whether the SAARC will at all be able to make the best of the situation. Now, the proactiveness of the BIMSTEC has been faced with major challenges, and it definitely, if you look into the websites of BIMSTEC, it is filled with a transfer and exchange of noteworthy news and precautionary measures for the global pandemic. But although India is undoubtedly acting as a driving force, but there are countries within the BIMSTEC that can actually help both SAARC as well as ASEAN to come together. For example, Thailand, and this is how India can also bring about, it can fill up the vacuum of this particular regional effort. And so, because our main idea is to bring about a shift from rhetoric to action, various important organizations like the JIP-MER BIMSTEC Telemedicine Network, the JBTN, designed to strengthen links among premier medical institutions in the region, can be utilized to research innovative medicines and knowledge sharing to fight the virus, And it is important that BIMSTEC realizes its own expertise itself to create a better zone of convergence, which will also be helpful in the long run to strengthen the foothold for the organization. Because as we know, Prime Minister Modi, in his swearing-in ceremony in 2019, had been very proactive in inviting the BIMSTEC members for the events for the organization. So from there, we can understand how much importance Modi has been associating BIMSTEC with. So I think time is absolutely right for BIMSTEC to, take a step forward, so that not only can it be used as an opportunity for its own growth and development, but also as a pivot for the Act East policy, so that the South Asian countries can somehow learn from the ASEAN countries in protecting themselves, from the COVID-19 virus, and regionalism is also an opportunity for regionalism to thrive back again, because we often know that regionalism often takes a setback because there are bilateral ties between nations here, and they function in a particular order. There are fears regarding regional groupings coming together, because sometimes there are examples of failures like SARC, which have not been able to build a proper consensus mechanism. So I think this should be taken or treated as an opportunity for regional mechanisms to function, so that countries can come together and work together. As I already said and mentioned, that the disease, the pandemic, it does not see borders. It will move across the border. It depends upon the climatic conditions also. And I think that time is right to bring forward organizations that have the capacity, that have the potential, that do not have political tensions, bilateral political tensions among themselves, and they can bring about a proper consensus generating mechanism among themselves, and help in not only putting forth COVID-19 solutions, but also working together in trade and connectivity in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohini. You wonderfully explained the condition of regional friendship or regional organization in South and Southeast Asia. As your specialization is in regionalism, I can understand why you are focusing on these areas, and your suggestions are really very good, I think. And all scholars, academicians, and other diplomats are listening to you. So I hope this will show the path to our statesmen. Now I love to invite our third speaker, who is junior fellow at ORF Kolkata, Mr. Souma Bhaumik. His research focus is on Indian economy, sustainability, globalization, and governance. He works closely with foreign direct investments and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Souma holds a double master's degree in economics, specialization in economics of globalization and European integration. He has previously been awarded the Government of Japan's Scholarship, Tokyo Foundation's Fellowship, and European Commission's Fellowship. His topic of today's discussion is the changing trends of regional order in the post-COVID world. Now I invite Souma to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Vashisht. Good evening, respected panelists, and many thanks to Global Tribune for this opportunity to express my views on the reshaping of global economic orders during the pandemic and in the post-COVID world. I want to throw some light on the role of regionalism for the Indian economy in the purview of its evolving Act East policy. Well, there is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic is one of the biggest disasters that the world has seen in many decades. The intensity of this catastrophe cannot be measured only by the number of infections or deaths, but also needs to take into account the consequences of the acute financial crisis that will ensue after the global public health situation is somewhat brought under control. The pandemic is a strong stimulus for the Indian economy to look inwards and to leverage on the potential of India's Act East policy by looking towards regional groupings such as BIMSTEC, SARC, and ASEAN to make the economy self-sufficient. This is mainly for three reasons. Firstly, when a disaster in one nation will not have an extreme positive correlation with another nation, so that there exists a certain level of insulation in times of crisis like these. Secondly, economies should be able to sustain short-run emergencies and supply chain disruptions that are most likely and like we are seeing are arising from China in the current scenario. And third and most importantly, countries should strive towards diminishing their external dependency and increase the efficacy of their domestic production and consumption processes. Now, coming to India's Act East policy, it is seen as a critical alternative to its non-participation in China's Belt and Road Initiative. And India's Northeast region is a crucial driver of this policy. While I was listening to the other panelists, I saw there were many questions regarding the potential of northeastern states. And I'd like to elaborate a little more that the northeastern states are economically important mainly on two fronts. Firstly, the strategic location of the region that connects the product markets between the larger Indian geography along with the robust Southeast Asian markets. And secondly, the existence of potent input market catalysts such as social, physical, human, and natural capitals in the region. India is poised to gain more importance in tackling the supply chain disruptions evolving from this pandemic situation and also containing China as an economic hegemon in the region. It is therefore important that the northeastern region be a major catalyst for India's foreign policy in its immediate neighborhood. Hence, tackling the coronavirus disaster in this particular region will have larger economic ramifications in Asia in terms of international connectivity, trade, and investments in the near future. In the last decade, Asia has emerged as the world's foreign investment growth engine. Despite a 5% contraction in FDI, Asia is the largest FDI recipient in the world in 2019. It hosts approximately 30% of the global FDI inflows, with the top five recipients being China, India, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and Singapore. However, UNCTAD estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic will lead to a massive contraction on FDI globally. China's economic growth has been severely impacted due to the drastic steps taken to contain the pandemic. On one hand, retail spending and fixed asset investments, the two major growth drivers, have also come down significantly. Further, since 2019, China has been embroiled in a trade war with the US, prompting many companies to relocate their manufacturing units from China to other nations and imposition of high tariffs and restrictions to Chinese imports. Even prior to the pandemic situation, there has been evidence of a flight of manufacturing capital from China. The shift in supply chains is seeing two manifestations: reshoring back to their own economies and nearshoring to nearby countries. In this context, South and Southeast Asia, mainly the economies of Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, and India, have emerged as the manufacturing hub substitutes to China. While the US China trade war played a major role in fueling this sentiment, companies have also begun seeking supply side diversification and resilience to counter rising the wage levels in China and the supply side shocks that the pandemic had presented. Companies across US, Japan, South Korea, and the EU with current Chinese bases are looking for alternatives and additional manufacturing hubs within the South and Southeast Asian region. Due to the changing order in Asia's economic diplomacy with the West, the need for regionalism in South and Southeast Asia is further substantiated, where we see that the regional economy has a crucial role to play in the post-COVID world order. And it requires India's Act East policy to work as a potent catalyst in this regard. Now, on one hand, when we see there is a growing need for regionalism in Asia to mainly cope up with the global recession that we are going into, India also portrays immense competition for foreign investments that are moving out of China. In such a scenario, India's contemporary Act East policy needs a more nuanced approach to successfully leverage on the FDI from the West that has immense potential of driving the Indian economy through the pandemic. While India, riding on the Make in India wave, is hopeful to attract the capital fleeing China, it may not be the first choice for many companies. For example, a study exploring FDI in India cites that in 2019, out of the 56 companies that shifted their production out of China, only 3 invested in India and 26 went to Vietnam, 11 to Taiwan, and 8 to Thailand. These studies were conducted by the Nomura Group. Additionally, more recently, in April 2020, out of the approximately 1,000 firms that were planning to leave China amidst the pandemic, and invest in Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries mainly, only 300 were seriously thinking of investing in India. An index titled Where Will They Go by the Dutch Rabobank finds that the most attractive FDI substitute nations to China. It finds that, we have also discussed how Vietnam has been so good in controlling the pandemic. Additionally, the study also finds that Vietnam's robust investment climate and low transportation costs put it among the top contenders along with Thailand, Malaysia, and Taiwan. India features fifth on that list, followed by other Southeast and Southeast Asian nations. In this context, India really needs to step up its efforts to attract these investments, which could fuel the economy in the post-COVID world. While India has a strong economy and large consumer base, the legal and logistical and administrative shortcomings are often problematic. Increased imposition of import duties to a 30-year high and the government's decision to opt out of the RCEP have reduced attractiveness for some quarters, not all, but some. In stark contrast, Vietnam is offering tax holidays to investors, bolstering investor-friendly climate. These are some of the learnings that the Indian economy needs to take in account while progressing with its Act East policy and the changing dimensions of its Act East policy in the post-COVID world. To conclude, the ongoing pandemic has highlighted in a pronounced way the dilution of Chinese dependency of the developed economies that once used to have on China. A big question that looms large in this scenario is that whether India will be able to substantially leverage on these investments that are departing China. Under such circumstances, the Indian economy seems to be placed on the horns of a dilemma, where on one hand, India's Act East policy is crucial for strengthening regional ties amidst the supply chain disruptions and the diplomatic tensions with China. And on the other hand, the domestic economy is in direct competition with its South and Southeast Asian peers for FDI that could reboot the ailing Indian economy. I would like to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shoma. You wonderfully described the effect of pandemic on the economy, as well as you discussed how it is changing dimensions between South and Southeast Asian relation.
Thank you.
Now the session is open for questions. There are already many questions. So I want to ask on behalf of the viewers. And the first question from Mahalaya Chatterjee. Her question is, what are the main advantages of Northeast India? I think she is willing to ask like how Act East policy is giving some advantages to Northeast India. Professor Dr. Lipi Ghosh, do you want to answer this question?
Please repeat the question. How Act East policy is giving? Will you please repeat the question?
The question of Mahalaya Chatterjee is what are the, yeah, it is in the comment section. What are the main advantages of Northeast India? Okay. I think she is willing to ask what are the main advantages of Northeast India during Act East policy, because as we know that in Look East policy, Northeast India was only a gateway. But in Act East policy, Northeast India is not a gateway, but also it is getting the fruits of the development what is we are getting from Act East policy. So the main advantages of Northeast India by Act East policy.
Understood.
If you answer, Lipidi.
As well as there is some
I think she is having some internet issue. Shoma, do you want to answer this?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, Professor
Yeah,
Ghosh, you're
Am I
DPD,
audible.
audible?
please.
You can go first, and then I
Yes,
can
DPD.
come in.
Yes. What I was telling that one advantage is that Northeast India is sharing one very long border with many Southeast Asian countries. That way, uh, connectivity proximity is one point of advantage that Southeast Asia, particularly Myanmar, if we look, and there are many projects also going on which can physically connect Northeast India or rest of India with Southeast Asia. And one advantage is that Northeast India is historically connected with Southeast Asia from their ethnic affinity or say cultural affinity. And that too, there are many places where it's already Shohini has pointed out that there is scope for cooperation through BIMSTEC. So BIMSTEC is one of the institutional mechanism, the interregional mechanism, where definitely Northeast India can play a definitive role. And also important thing is that since Northeast India is so uh, closely geographically connected with Southeast Asia, perhaps tourism is a big sector. And not only that, heritage cultural tourism, also in the post-COVID period, we can think of health tourism, that considerable cooperation between India and Southeast Asia, and since if the connectivity things can be improved and developed, then perhaps that will be more open, and these Southeast Asian states can be more close to India also.
Thank you, Lipidi. Actually, you touched all the comments written by another viewer, Vijay Shankar Bhattacharya. He is writing about the tourism, ethnic similarities, and also fruits industry, food industry, etc. Thank you, Lipidi. Shoma, do you want to add
Uh,
something?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Professor Ghosh, for your comments. I just want to add 2 points that over the years we have seen there has been a large amount of Japanese investments in Northeast Asia, mostly in infrastructure building, and the reason for that is because even our immediate neighborhood understands the importance of Northeast India and how the Northeast Indian states could connect the large the large Southeast Asian markets. Apart from that, there has also been discussions regarding the border economies in Northeast India because the states share so many borders in the immediate neighborhood. That apart, the 2 points that I also touched upon in my presentation was one of them being, the strategic position of the states very usefully connects the Indian markets to the booming markets in Southeast Asia, such as Thailand, Myanmar, etc. I also happen to track the sustainable development goals and how the Indian states are performing based on those. The Northeast Indian states basically perform very well in the sustainability indexes. And why it is important is in this context that all the sustainability concerns encapsulate the four main capitals, which is the physical capital in terms of infrastructure innovation, human capital in terms of labor markets, poverty, natural capital in terms of life on land, life underwater, um, all of these. And these capitals are pretty much very well endowed in the Northeast Indian states that are required for a long term growth in the region. That's all. And Mr. Kundu, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, there is some network issues, I think. So, Professor Dr. Lipi Ghosh and Nandini Vasisht has gone out. Let me
I
check
think
once.
they have
Yeah,
joined in.
I think they've joined.
yeah, they have joined
Yes,
again. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to request
Sohini,
Dr.
do you want
Nandini
to
Vasisht, please
say
conclude
something?
something.
Soma, have you finished?
Yes, I have finished.
Okay. So we have one more question that is on the Northeast again. Does Northeast India receive any benefit from Southeast Asian countries during the present crisis? From Achinto Kumar Dotto. Dibakar, do you have time to answer this or not?
Yeah, sure. Please continue.
Or just you want to conclusion?
No, you please
Okay.
give this
So
questions
this
answer.
question is from Achinto Kumar Dotto. Does Northeast India receive any benefit? Yeah, no, I just want to ask the speaker to answer this question. Does Northeast India receive any benefit from Southeast Asian countries during the present crisis? Lipidi, do you want to answer?
Not only Northeast India, not specifically Northeast India, but there is exchange of knowledge between India and Southeast Asia. It is going on. So about Northeast India, if you ask me, I don't have any specific information, but I understand that one collaborative effort to exchange this knowledge is going on between India and Southeast Asia, not only Southeast Asia, even different countries of Asia. That's all.
Also, to add to that, it is not only during
Okay.
the pandemic.
So in conclusion, I just want to
Show my
Just one line. It is also not only during the pandemic. If you notice,
yes,
there are
Shoma, please continue.
the large scale infrastructure investment that has been happening in Northeast India for many years. Many of the investors are from Southeast Asian countries, especially Japan. The big infrastructure projects in Northeast India are operationalized by Japan. So it is not only, not specifically, I will not specifically speak about the pandemic, but for a long-term holistic development, yes, Southeast Asia and the big East Asian economies has a major role to play in developing Northeast India as a main corridor towards that could facilitate India's Act East policy. Thank you.
even Thailand, to add one more line, even Thailand has some specific projects. They are contemplating some specific projects about Northeast India, especially about Tripura state, where Thai
Yes.
princess visited recently. That was pre-COVID period. So, not especially during pandemic, but as Shomo Bhomik has already pointed out, there are collaborative measures between from the pre-pandemic days also. Yes, is over.
Dr. Nandini Vasisht, I think she has again disconnected her net
She
connection.
got
Maybe.
disconnected.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, lastly, just want to I want to say that lots of thanks to all of you for coming and joining us. So definitely, we would like to say that on the behalf of our organization, in the future we will definitely do our same webinar also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you very much
you.
to the organizer.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskar.